Welcome into episode number 18 of the Cleveland Sports Realm. I am Kevin. I'm joined alongside my good friend and fellow co-host, Jerome. Jerome, how we doing this Thursday evening?
Doing well. And a little housekeeping right off the top here. We are recording this in advance as producer Derek and myself will both be out of town next week. So a little bit of an early recording, still scheduled to drop on the same date, so it won't really change much for you guys. But with that, with us wanting to be as relevant as possible, covering a little bit bigger issues tonight, like
I would say more broad current events in Cleveland sports. So kind of what we got on the docket for today's show, today's episode. Going to talk a lot about, the Browns' upcoming offseason and maybe just kind of the ideas of where we want to go with them in free agency and the NFL draft coming up and kind of look at different routes that the team can take in order to try to better themselves for the upcoming 2025 season. And then go from there and see. We don't know. We don't have any expectation on how long this episode may or may not go. Obviously, you as a listener you probably are looking at the time at the very bottom right now, wondering how long this is.
Yeah,
So.
we're going to go with the flow tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I did want to say we're going to cover a couple things. We aren't going to touch on Chubb. We actually went pretty in-depth on that last episode.
Yeah.
So we're not going to go there, but where would you like to lead off with tonight?
Yeah, so I would like to lead off. I believe this news dropped the day after we released last week's episode. And that's that Juan Thornhill was released. I guess it's not huge news, but I think it is something that we should probably touch on, considering he was, kind of a bigger free agent acquisition a couple of years ago, and obviously part of that playoff team of 2023. His significance, you can argue, honestly, that year on how significant he was for that team, but kind of a controversial. He ended up being a controversial player in Cleveland this last year in particular.
Well, he got lazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the bottom line. He got lazy, and I really don't want to diminish this, but I got nothing else to really tell you besides it's another Andrew Berry failure, and that list just keeps growing and growing and growing.
Especially at the safety position. You look at Andrew Sendejo, didn't work out here. John Johnson III didn't work out here. Now you go after Juan Thornhill, he didn't work out here. It's a laundry list right now of free agent booms or busts, I should say, for Andrew Berry.
Yeah, absolutely, and Thornhill was brought in here. You thought he had that Chiefs pedigree, and, that was a big reason they brought him. He's a winner, and I'll give him that. He was really, really good in Kansas City, but one of two things happened here. He didn't carry the same work ethic in Cleveland, and that could be it, or he was a SPAG system player. And I don't know, which one of those it was, but I'll tell you, Juan Thornhill knew this was coming a while ago. He had made a Instagram live comment about it, I believe, last December, that he knew he wasn't going to be around any longer. And then also when you think about it, that I really think the last straw that broke the camel's back was him jogging against the Saints. And I know the team was already out of it, but come on. Really? That's the effort you're going to give, and you're supposed to be a veteran leader. It was just another Berry failure.
Yeah, and I remember back, this would have been probably episode 4 or 5 whenever that Saints game was, that you and I basically looked right into the camera and were very, very hostile towards Juan Thornhill and honestly the entire the Browns locker room at that point, because it seemed like the Browns were losing games, but it wasn't. We couldn't even be proud of the effort that they were putting out onto the field, I should say. So that was one of those things that we were harping on. And I don't want to diminish Juan Thornhill's playing ability, because he was a second-round pick when he came into the league, and obviously was a top 5 player for probably that Chiefs defense in particular that won a couple Super Bowls. So I don't want to diminish his play, but when you're not showing effort out there, then you start losing the fans. And I hate to say it, but I'm not really sorry to have let him go.
Not at all. Again, I got not much else to add, but laundry list is growing and growing and growing of Andrew Berry failures. And I'm not going to, like you said, sit here and freak out because Juan Thornhill didn't work out. But at the same time, you just start adding the list and just basically add it to the list is all I could say.
Yeah, and undrafted rookie Ronnie Hickman, actually this would have been his. Was this his rookie year? This is his second year.
Yeah.
Ronnie Hickman's been playing well as an undrafted when he came in as an undrafted rookie in 2023. He's had a good 2 years here, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing if he can take over that starting safety spot next year.
Well, I think that's the plan.
Yeah.
Because he's cheap, and he was already getting reps over Thornhill by the end of the season. I remember
he was
watching the last few games, and you saw a lot of Hickman and a lot of Thornhill standing around on the sidelines, and so I absolutely expect that to take place during the 2025 training camp and beyond.
Well, we went to that game in Pittsburgh, Browns-Steelers, and we had noticed that Juan Thornhill was on the sideline for at least half of the snaps, it seemed like. Now, I didn't see the snap count, and I don't know the percentages he played. I didn't look back and check. But it looked like when the Browns were on defense, you look at the sideline, and you would see number 1 Thornhill back towards you on the sideline. So, yeah, you can absolutely make that argument that his play was diminishing towards the end of his tenure here for sure. It's going to be interesting to see if he's given a shot this upcoming free agency.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll get some type of veteran minimum deal to go somewhere, and that's fine. Good for him. The Browns got to look to cut cost at every opportunity they have, and this is just another thing along the line. So
yeah, and speaking of potentially cutting costs here, transitioning now into the Myles Garrett saga that's going on right now. Now, I don't know if this is going to be solved by the time this airs, but as of Thursday, February 27th of this recording, Myles Garrett's camp has come out and said that they're basically not going to sign an extension with the Browns no matter what the offer is, no matter if it's the highest paid contract in NFL history outside of a quarterback or anything. He's got no interest in being here anymore. And it just seems like there's these random public statements that are coming out from the Browns and then from Myles Garrett's camp that are almost, for lack of a better term, subtweeting each other. It's unbelievable what's going on. And we had touched on this past episode. But you cannot carry this into this upcoming season. You absolutely cannot. It doesn't look like there's going to be an end in sight that ends with Myles Garrett in brown and orange by this upcoming season.
No, I don't think that's. I at this point, I don't see a resolve happening where he's a Brown. And I think the Browns are doing this right now. I hope they are. They're saying all the right things publicly, but behind closed doors, they need to be driving up the price and driving up the price and driving up the price until they get a stupid offer from some team and then take it, send him on his way, and be done with it. Because like you said, Kevin, there's no resolve coming to this. And, Myles Garrett was always a pretty stand-up guy. Now, I can understand being a fan and a diehard fan of this god-awful football team this year. I can understand where his frustration as a player comes from, but I think for the first time in his career, Myles Garrett's kind of handled this poorly too.
Yeah, I think so. He basically went on a public shaming tour of us, going from station
Radio
to station.
Row.
Radio, yeah, exactly. He went on Radio Row and basically was just pleading other teams to come trade for him. And I know the NBA's got rules on tampering. I thought the NFL did too. Like, I feel like that would be almost directly tampering. Is it just NFL executives and NFL head coaches that can't talk about players, but players can openly advocate for other teams to come after them? That seems like a one-way street.
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to profess and claim to know every little detail of the tampering laws, but I can tell you this, that if the NFL is going to come down on a player for doing this, it's not going to be Myles Garrett. They're going to come down on some scrub for doing it. It's not going to be Myles Garrett who's going to, be punished for that. And, what he did, I didn't really appreciate. I get it, though. I get why he's so frustrated. 8 years and not a darn thing to show for it. I get why he's frustrated. He is, in my opinion, the best pass rusher in the league. I don't know if he's the best defensive player. He is the best pass rusher in the league. And he'll be a hell of an ad for whoever has him next year. But the more and more, this goes on, I don't see it resolving in him coming back to the Browns. But the old adage is time heals all wounds. Let's see if maybe that will help. But at this point, it's not looking likely, man. I mean, this is getting out of control.
I think it's in both parties' interest to go separate ways, quite honestly. With where the Browns are as an organization, you send Myles in the middle of his prime to potentially a currently contending team or a team that's trying to make that next step, which, let's say maybe that is a Chicago Bears. Maybe you do get a top 10 pick, a second round pick, and maybe a first next year for the Bears to try try to beef up that defensive front. We still have the number 2 pick and another top 10 pick. Got 2 firsts next year. Things start all of a sudden look a little. Things are looking up. Things are looking up at that point. So, and then Myles Garrett gets what he wants. He gets to go to a team that's truly trying to compete for something. When it comes to a trade, which it does look like that's probably where this is headed, is there a minimum that you would accept for Myles? Are you looking at players? Are you looking at picks? Are you looking at both?
I've said from the start, I'm not taking anything less than 2 first-round picks.
Neither am I.
And a player.
2 firsts and a player.
That's what I think that they should be asking for. And if teams don't like it, they don't like the asking price. Well, that's too bad. They can hold on to him. They can do the Houston Deshaun Watson and send him home or whatever the hell they want to do. I don't care. Or technically he's under contract and he has no out or anything like that. Like technically, if they don't trade him, he needs to report to training camp. Now, will he? I don't think so.
Well, then you start getting fined. You start losing that money.
Yeah. Well, and that's probably not like you said, this is going to get, if it's just going the way I think it's going and you think it's going to continue to get uglier. So like my hope right now is a lot of times teams overpay stupid prices at the draft.
Yeah.
I think hopefully by the draft you send him on his way.
Yeah, I'm thinking right now of that Khalil Mack trade from, it would have been, I think, 2018 when he went for 2 firsts and I want to say a second, something like that. Because Khalil Mack at that time was a top 3 pass rusher in the game. And it was the Bears that ended up making that move, actually coincidentally as well, because I just brought them up a minute or two ago. It was the Bears that made that huge move to go after him. That's what I would be expecting too. At least 2 first-round picks. Now I don't know if you're going to be able to get a starter in that, like a starting player. I'm not sure, but two first-round picks would be my starting price. If it's a team that's in the 20s, that's looking to trade up, then I think it's more realistic. You're looking at 2 firsts and a potential starter. But if it's a top 10, 15 pick of a team that's looking to trade for him, I think it's about 2 firsts is probably his asking price.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know. Like I said, I would start it crazy high because everything's a negotiation, and what you start asking for is not what you're going to end up for. I mean, I don't know. I would really hope that the Browns behind closed doors are talking to every team in the NFL, because publicly I'm not criticizing what they're doing, right? Like I'm not criticizing them saying he's a Cleveland Brown and now, from Cleveland to Canton and all that and blah, 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 blah. That's fine. But if behind closed doors you're sitting on your hands and just pleading for him to come back, that's not the right thing you need to be doing either.
Well, no, and especially when he's basically said, no matter what you bring to me, I don't want to be here anymore. I mean, they've basically come out and said that they're going to offer him the biggest non-quarterback contract in NFL history. And that would be the only thing. If he doesn't think he's going to win here, that would be the only factor you think he'd look at in terms of wanting to stay.
Money.
And he's the money, yeah, and he's turning that down before it's even offered to him, essentially.
Well, you know what they say, though. This is a good play by the Browns, too. Money is the ultimate motivator for these guys. We all know that no matter what pro sport you're talking about, money is the ultimate motivator, right? So I would think, offering him this contract is a smart move to go about it, because if this was a whole ploy about money, which I initially thought it to be, and I said that on this podcast, right now it looks like I'm getting proved wrong, by the most recent reports we're gathering here.
Yeah.
So if that's not going to motivate him, nothing is.
Yeah, nothing is. And
right.
Is there a team that you look at across the other 31 teams in the NFL? We'll say 28 because we'll eliminate the rest of the AFC North because that's definitely not happening. When you look across the rest of the NFL, the other 28 teams, is there one that sticks out to you that you feel like this team makes the most sense, that's going to make that move to try to propel themselves to be a Super Bowl champion next year with an addition of Myles Garrett?
I think the Commanders makes a lot of sense. And
that's
I know
the first team that... Yeah.
I know that's been publicly stated a lot, and I do think it makes a lot of sense. They have a lot of draft capital. I think it would make him happy. They got to the NFC title game last year. They're a hell of a lot farther along than us. Their quarterback situation's night and day from ours.
Right.
They have weapons on the outside. That is a good defense. Jonathan Allen in the middle. they've traded a lot of their.
But she was in that same draft class, actually,
Yeah,
Jonathan Allen.
They've traded a lot of their premier pass rushers away, but you look at guys on the back end of that defense, like Mikey Sanders still had an outstanding rookie year. The middle's solid. I mean, that is a good defense, and I think it's a defense that if he got there, they can be on the
best
brink.
Defense in the league.
They could be on the brink of becoming elite. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a team that makes sense for me. How about yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, the Commanders are definitely, I think, the one that sticks out as the one that makes the most sense, especially with them being in the NFC. You know, it's an easy target for the Browns as well. Get them out of the AFC. We don't want to face them or have a highly likelihood of facing him. But another team that I think sticks out, and it's a team that we've talked about in the past of getting to those big games and just not being able to get to the big game and being able to make a statement there. I could see the Bills getting desperate. I definitely could see the Bills getting desperate.
The issue there is they're always right up against the cap, right? So
yeah, they unloaded some of that last offseason, though.
They did. I know Von Miller's there. I believe he's a free agent. So if they brought in Myles, then that would probably close the door on a Von Miller reunion there, I would imagine.
Yeah, depending. And I know Von Miller and Myles Garrett are actually pretty close because they're both A&M boys.
A&M connection.
Yeah.
Right. No, that team makes a lot of sense too, and I'm sure that, I would imagine, again, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that Brandon Beane and Andrew Berry have had conversations, and same with Adam Peters in Washington.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Sure. It'll be interesting to see how things develop, and especially free agency is going to play a lot into that. You know, if the Commanders end up somehow adding a pass rusher or the Bills end up adding a pass rusher, then, they might just be taken out of the Myles Garrett sweepstakes just based off of not having that need in its own.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And like I said, I think the best time would be the draft to resolve this whole issue. Maybe when the league year opens. I just don't see the Browns doing it when the league year opens. I think that and I don't think they should, nor should they. I think they should continue driving up that price till somebody pays, an astronomical, absurd fee.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, try to maximize your value. That's what you try to do, in the world of business in and of itself. When the value's high, get out of it basically. And not that you want to ever get out of Myles Garrett, but I mean he's coming off a Defensive Player of the Year last year, or the previous year, I should say, 2023.
Ago,
So he's right in the middle of his prime.
It just does suck as a Browns fan, right? Because this is a special talent. This is a guy who played on one of the worst teams in the league and still managed to finish top 5 in DPOY. Man, I mean, come on, It sucks to have to unload them, but it's what's going to have to happen. And it's at a point now where the Browns are so bad that they were at this point once before. They were so bad that not even the biggest contracts can motivate guys to come here. And that's a bad place to be in. They're in a bad, bad spot.
Yeah, they're absolutely in a absolutely horrendous spot. And I did have a question for you. If Myles Garrett's career, if we've seen him play his last down as a Cleveland Brown, and I bring this up because him and Joe Thomas are easily the two best Browns players that we've seen in our lifetime, and the best homegrown talent, obviously, by that metric as well. If Myles Garrett, if we've seen the last of him in a Cleveland Browns uniform, who do you think has been a better Brown all time? Joe Thomas or Myles Garrett?
Well, that's a tough one because the loyalty with Joe, this guy had an opportunity to go win a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning and said, I'm going to continue playing here for a winless,
It is unbelievable.
Statistically, Joe got every honor you could as a
snap streak
left tackle. He literally couldn't have been better. Myles, on the other hand, though, was probably the best defensive player in this franchise's history. This is a franchise that goes back to 1946, minus the 3 years in the 90s. I'm a pretty big historian on the Browns too, and I know I wasn't alive for the 70s and the 80s and even back to the 50s with Otto Graham and all that in the Paul Brown era. But from studying it statistically and analyzing it, I don't think there's been a better player on the defensive side of the ball in Cleveland Browns history. But just based off the one metric I can use to base that Joe's would end up being better was he ended up completing more seasons here and probably stayed on the field more and was a little bit healthier throughout his career. But you're talking about one already in Canton, one who's going to go to Canton. And Myles Garrett could hang him up today and he's in Canton.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So to me, I'm going to give the edge to Joe just by we're splitting hairs though, basically.
Right.
But yeah, how about yourself? What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think it's going to look a little bit differently a few years from now. I think a lot of people are going to be prisoners of the moment and say that it is Myles Garrett just because of that Defensive Player of the Year and because just off of recency bias. And when you look at defensive ends and pass rushers, you're looking at stats, and when you're an offensive tackle, you're hoping that there's zeros next to everything and not actual higher numbers,
Right, of course. Yes.
So, I mean, I would give the edge. I agree with you. I think I would go Joe Thomas as well. Honestly, I think Joe Thomas meant more to the city too. And just his loyalty, I think, just spoke volumes to what you were saying earlier with the rumor of I believe the Broncos offered a first-round pick for Joe Thomas, and in that moment, it made sense for the Browns to do something like that because they were a rebuilding team, and Joe Thomas was on the latter part of his career to go and chase a championship with one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and Joe Thomas wanted to remain loyal and retire with the orange and brown on. So I think that does add an element to it, and that's why I would probably pick Joe too.
Yeah. I think it's very close though.
Yeah, two best players that we've seen wear Browns uniforms in our lifetime, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I would even say Myles was the best defensive player in the franchise's history.
I would agree with you there.
I really would, all the way back to the 1940s. So, again, it's tough. It's tough to be that bad that you got to trade that guy, but that's where we are. That's the reality of this situation, and it's miserable. I mean,
it's insane just where we were last year at this point.
Yeah.
You would have never convinced me that a year from like today that we would have to be trading our best player and the best defensive player in football.
And I will go out and say this, and I don't want to sit here and bash Myles Garrett. I already did do a little criticism of him, and I'm not going to continue. But the one thing that does drive me nuts is it's very well documented that towards the end, Myles and Baker had a fractured relationship. Myles, to me, probably had some sort of say or checked some sort of box to bring you-know-who in. And now you-know-who's been terrible here.
Well, this is a conspiracy here.
And who's been horrendous, and now Myles like, oh well, they made that move. No, you ran the previous guy out of town, and look what we're stuck with. And so, to me, I do think that he deserves a little bit of criticism there because of how defensive he was at the beginning of Deshaun Watson. I don't know if that's him being a good teammate publicly and maybe behind closed doors he always hated this. I don't know, but you ran the previous guy out of town. So when you run somebody out of town, you have to find a substitute no matter what it was. We end up finding the worst one in NFL history. And guess what? Now all of a sudden, he's still here. Somehow, some way, he won't really be relevant.
I guess he's using the Browns facilities right now.
That's fine. I mean, whatever. Who cares? Really? I mean, I hate to be so rude about it, but like, who cares? Like, he's never gonna play again. So like, rehab all. I know previously he's used Clemson's facilities where he was great. Like, for all I care, he can use the Texans if he's still. I mean, I don't care. Like, I hate to be so negative, and I really, really hate sitting here and just, being so negative about the Browns. But I love them so much. But like, if I'm going to be truthful to our loyal listeners and to the people who subscribe to this podcast and tune in for our takes, how could I sit here and feed you anything positive about the Browns? It'd be a plate of horse crap. It's so...
Well, you can't.
Exactly. And that's why I feel like I hate sitting here being this negative, but there's a realistic point of view of this, that we are in a horrible position, and the whole thing is makes me disappointed and sad. I mean,
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we talked about when we went back to like those years in 2017, 8 years ago, when we're coming off of that 1-15 year, and we didn't know it at the time, but we were going into an 0-16 year, and there was way more hope than what we have now. We had 2 first-round picks going into that year. We traded up into the first round that year and had 3 first-round picks. We had hope. That's what we could actually lean our head on at the end of the day was, yeah, we suck, we stink, but we have 14, 15 draft picks. We know that there's a direction that we're headed. We know that there's a generational player coming out, and we have the number 1 pick in a Myles Garrett. You fast forward 8 years, we're looking to trade that franchise pillar. There's no way that you can look at this in a positive way, because you had your run. What you built this for all that lead up was for the year of 2020 that ended in one playoff win. You have another playoff appearance 2 years later, 3 years later, and that's all you have to show for this. And that's for all the misery that we went through. And the one guy that wanted to be here for it, Baker, isn't.
No. And so what do you think about that? That Myles Garrett maybe deserves a little bit of the blame himself, for the way the Watson
Yeah,
thing.
so I was going to ask you about that. If I remember correctly, did that fraction not start to happen after Myles hit Rudolph over the head and Baker called him out post-game?
Yes, that's when it first was reported to have taken place. So that goes from 2019. So that means that they were still teammates for 2.5 more years.
Yeah, but they were also chest bumping like crazy when they beat the Steelers in the playoffs and stuff like that. So I don't know how much of that is like. I get annoyed with you a lot. You get annoyed with me a lot. Friends can get annoyed with each other. Friends can say stuff that they don't mean and stuff like that. So I don't know if they had I don't know how that relationship worked, and I'm not gonna try to pretend like I did. So I don't know. I mean, obviously you were in the building for a little bit.
Yeah, I was there the whole time. But again, I mean, I'm not going to profess to be in the locker room all the time.
Right.
I mean, I'm out on the fields. I'm a groundskeeper. But
sure.
I mean, the whole thing, like, the whole thing is just, it's really sickening. Like, the whole way it's gone down, and neither of them are here. Like, you had back-to-back number 1 overall picks, and not officially, but you're looking to begin 8 years later with neither of them present. And again, do I think Baker Mayfield's ever going to win a Super Bowl? No. No, I really don't. I don't even know if Baker Mayfield's ever going to get to a title game. I really don't. I sit here and I don't think he is.
Like a conference championship game, you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Like a conference title game.
Yeah.
As I sit here today in February of 2025, I don't think he'll ever get there, like in his career. But do I also look at where the Browns are and think, God, they probably got at least another year or two before they'd even be in the wild card? Like, that's realistically what it looks like. But then again, the only thing that gives me hope is, I feel like I'm talking in circles here. I kind of am, but I'm trying to relate it to everything. The only thing that does give me hope here is, hey, look at Washington. I mean, they were in a horrid spot. You get that guy.
Coincidentally had the number 2 overall pick.
Exactly. You get that guy. Oh, look out.
Yeah.
The whole thing changes.
That's what you and I, when we were back in the dorms at Baldwin Wallace, you and I had said, the Browns stink, but they're a quarterback away. If you remember those conversations, and then we got a quarterback, and all of a sudden we're a competitive football team. All you need is that guy. All you need is solid quarterback play, and you're all of a sudden an average football team at worst.
And that's why, and I'm going to, bridge this to a conversation we had on last week's podcast. Okay. That's why, as I sit here, the more and more I think about it, they have to go quarterback.
Oh, so you're locked in. We had talked about it a little bit last week, but you're locked into quarterback no matter what.
They have to. In the position they're in, they can't not go quarterback. And again, I have no idea if either of these kids are going to be great. Probably not, because the Browns are drafting them, and the Browns aren't good at that. But you have to give yourself a chance, and the only way you have a chance is by drafting one of those kids.
But what if both stink? What if it's the 2021 class where it's Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis?
Kevin, add it to the list. I mean, we have a list of 40-plus guys that haven't been able to shake it. So make it 41, then draft one again next year. Like, they have to keep doing it until they get it right. Like, that's the spot they've put themselves in.
I don't think that's fair to the quarterbacks that they're drafting. Because okay, so what if it's three drafts from now we've drafted 3 straight quarterbacks to get it right. The third guy is the guy, right? What if those previous 2 first-round picks could have been a receiver and a left tackle for him? Make it easier.
Yeah, I guess you're right. But
like, I don't think we can just start throwing darts at a dartboard just every single year and hoping that we hit a bullseye. I don't think you can do that. I think you got to look at the scenario. If your guy is there, and I mentioned this last week, if your guy is there, take him. If your guy is Cam Ward, but the Titans take him at 1, and you don't think as highly as Shador or of Shador as Cam, do not take him. That's where I stand on it. But if you do love Shador, take Shador. I'm not going to like it, but at least I can say at the end of the day, okay, this organization truly likes this kid and they want to give him a shot because they think that he is a franchise quarterback, not dang, we got to take one. All right, just take Shador.
Okay.
I'd rather them believe in him than just take him.
Yeah, I agree with you that on the element of, you don't want to throw darts at a board, but we look at I'm going to relate to it again. Look at Washington. They were lost in the wilderness for years. They took that guy. And look at him now.
Yeah, sure. But they could have loved him. Do you think Washington took Jaden Daniels because they needed a quarterback or because they loved him as a prospect? Or
I think probably 75% because they loved him, and in my opinion, the Caleb Williams stuff was hogwash, and he was the best quarterback in the draft, undoubtedly. And 25% because, hey, the only way that this thing's going to go up the escalator and start moving fast is if we take the quarterback.
Sure, but so you are saying that more than 50% is because they loved him, though.
Right.
Because obviously you don't draft a quarterback in the first round unless you need one.
Right.
So of course,
I don't know. There's some teams that do just for the hell of it, but I don't understand that philosophy.
You're talking about like the Packers?
Well, there's teams like that. I mean, there's teams that, they view that the Packers, we could criticize them and make fun of them for drafting a guy and then duct taping his ass to the bench for 4 years, but ultimately their philosophy seemed to have worked. I mean, because
Sure.
they've rolled from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, who I don't know if he's quite as good as those two guys, but
He's not.
They have a quarterback who on a year in and year out basis, and Jordan Love can get them in the conversation, in the picture. So is their draft, you could make fun of it, but on the, with hindsight being 2020, you can look at it and say, well, damn, that's worked out for them, and they've had a quarterback
Sure.
for the last 30 years.
Yeah, but I disagree with you in the fact that there are teams that take quarterbacks in the first round when they don't need them. I can't remember one off the top of my head. I mean, unless you are talking about the Packers because they didn't need Love to start immediately, but at the end of the day, they did draft him with the knowledge that they would need a quarterback in 3-4 years. So
I guess the one that does come to mind is last year when Atlanta took Penix because they just had given Kirk Cousins like the moon, the stars, and the earth to bring him down there.
Okay. That's a fair one because that one did definitely take the entire National Football League by storm, and everybody was shocked by that one.
And then there's teams that you think probably need a quarterback and should draft one, and they don't. That happens a lot too in the first round.
Right. I mean, the Browns have actually done that a couple times. They passed on Deshaun Watson in 2017 at pick 12, and in the same draft they passed on Mitch Trubisky at pick 1, which does prove my point that unless it's your guy, you probably shouldn't take him.
Yeah, I agree. And listen, like I said, as I sit here in late February, I think they need one, so take one because you're not going to be able to dig yourselves out of this graveyard any other way. But also, let's see what they do in free agency because free agency kind of does shape the way you draft, right?
Yeah, it does. It definitely plays into it for sure.
So if the Browns, in my opinion, let's just say hypothetically that Daniel Jones is their quarterback next year.
Okay.
Then I'm thinking, well, let Daniel Jones start, give him one last shot to prove it because we're not going to go anywhere anyway. So let him prove it, see if he's got a chance. And then you draft Daniel Jones. Well, then maybe you don't have to take one at 1 or pick 2, but you still take one in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Like, no matter what, to me, even with free agency, no matter what, I will look right in the camera and I'll say this. No matter what happens, if the Cleveland Browns complete the 7-round draft this year without taking a singular quarterback, I don't care who that it is a failure of a draft. They have one on the roster right now. That's Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's not it. He ain't it, and he ain't going to be it. So Deshaun Watson, we know he's not it. I mean, he's so far from it, it's disgusting. So, no, if they complete the 7-round draft and don't take one, I'm going to be livid.
Yeah, hey, listen, I agree with you. I think you got to at least, when it comes to those later rounds and you haven't taken one, then yeah, then I actually do agree with maybe throwing a dart at a dartboard in that instance. And one that actually does kind of stand out to me. Now, I know we've talked a lot about this running back class, and we pointed out the 2 Ohio State running backs, Judkins and Henderson. And I do prefer Henderson over Judkins. Henderson's probably like my RB2 or RB3. But as you know, I'm known to be an Ohio State hater, and this is going to shock you, probably me saying this, because I've mentioned my love for not only the Ohio State running backs, but also I love Emeka Egbuka too. But I wouldn't mind, at the end of round 3, maybe with our 4th round pick, if he's still there, I would love to draft Will Howard.
So would I.
I would love it. His senior year, and I'm not comparing him to this player, so I do not want this to be taken out of context this way, but his senior year reminded me a lot of Joe Burrow's senior year at LSU. The high completion percentage, the playmakers that he had around him that he could rely on, the completion percentage I already said, excuse me, but 5th-year senior, won a national championship, led his team, he was a transfer. I mean, a lot of it is parallel to the Joe Burrow path, and I do think Joe Burrow was a significantly better prospect, so I don't want to hype Will Howard up to be that way, but he's 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds. Not that he's a scrambler, but he can definitely move a little bit too. And in that national championship game and all throughout the playoffs, when you were facing the elite talent, he was doing what Kevin Stefanski wants. He was throwing in rhythm. He was throwing the timing routes. He was doing the play action well. He looked like he was running a legitimate pro-style offense, and he impressed me.
Well, I think that's true because it was Chip Kelly's offense. Chip Kelly spent a lengthy amount of time in the pros, a couple head coaching stints, 2 different spots. So, yeah, I wear scarlet and gray stuff a lot on this podcast. I'm not tonight. I'm not going to hide my true colors. I love the Buckeyes. And if they drafted Will Howard, I would have 0 complaints. I would have 0 complaints, and I'd be thrilled. Like, to me, again, though, whether they draft one or, I made it very clear they have to draft one, but I want to see what they do in free agency first. Is the Kirk Cousins stuff a bunch of smoke? I don't know. We'll find out in a couple of weeks here, once the free agency opens. Now, if they don't go hard after a quarterback in free agency, then I'm right back to they got to draft 1 or 2.
Yeah, I'm still not on that. I mean, it depends on what the free agency. You're saying if they don't sign one at all, then they have to draft 1 at 2.
I mean, I would imagine, like, logistically, they have to sign one, right? Like,
you would think.
They literally have one that's healthy.
Yeah.
Like, and the other one, whether he's healthy or not, I don't want him anywhere near that stadium.
Yeah, neither do I.
So let's just say, for all intents and purposes, they have one who's healthy, who, I mean, again, really good kid, really nice kid. He'll have a good career in something else that ain't the NFL. That's who's on the DTR.
Yeah,
yeah. I again, to me, it just you have to attack the quarterback position. It is so important in sports, and they're not like, look, let's say they draft the Penn State kid, Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
To replace Myles Garrett.
Sure.
And let's say he's outstanding.
Yeah.
The Browns, Abdul Carter could have a Hall of Fame career, and the Browns could never make the playoffs one time. Like, I hate to say that, but it's probably true. Like, but if, let's say they draft Shedeur Sanders, hypothetically, or Cam Ward, and they have a Hall of Fame, like, the Browns are going to be a contender year in and year out. It's such an important.
Yeah, but if Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders are busts and Abdul Carter's a Hall of Famer, in 2 years we're going to say we could have had that guy.
But my thing is, what does that guy get you? We have a Hall of Fame defensive player who wants his way out right now. What did it get us? 1 playoff win in almost a decade?
Are you saying we should have drafted Mitch Trubisky in 2017 over Myles Garrett because?
No, I'm not. But I'm saying the quarterback.
It's kind of the point you're making.
The quarterback position is so important that they have to attack it head on, and I don't have much faith that they're going to do the right thing.
And how could you? Listen, I'm with you on that. I just don't. I'm not a huge fan of just drafting a quarterback because we need one. I think it's got to be a legitimate player, and if not, then we got to look elsewhere. We got to look at an Abdul Carter or a Travis Hunter or a Mason Graham or something like that, so that when we do have a quarterback that we like, we have some pieces around him. That's what happened when we drafted Baker. We had Myles Garrett. We had David Njoku. We signed Jarvis Landry. We made sure that rookie quarterback came in. We had a veteran quarterback in the locker room with him. We made sure that he was surrounded with the tools that he needed to succeed, and that's what led Baker to those first few good years.
Yeah, you have to have a good infrastructure.
You absolutely do. So to draft a quarterback at 1 right now, we're going to be bringing in basically what Tim Couch came into with absolutely nobody, and then we're going to run him out of town.
Yeah, I guess I could see your point too, but I'm standing firm on mine. Again.
So Cam Ward gets taken at 1. You're taking Shedeur at 2.
If they don't sign, like, it depends what they do in free agency. Like I explained, like, let's say they have someone who could feasibly start, whether that's Daniel Jones or Kirk Cousins or somehow they can work out money and Stafford, like something, like let's say one of these names that's out there comes here, then yeah, you don't have to draft one in the first round, but you got to still draft one. Like, again, I'm telling you, if they go 7 rounds without drafting a quarterback, I don't care who they get, it is a failure of a draft.
I agree with you. I think at some point a quarterback needs to be drafted, whether it is at 2 or whether it is later in the draft. I agree. Now, your pick of the litter. Titans go Abdul Carter at 1. Let's say. Pick of the litter of the quarterbacks in the draft. Who are you taking it to?
Do they sign somebody in free agency?
I'll give you both scenarios. We'll start with if they sign a quarterback in free agency, who is your ideal player at 2? We don't know who the Titans have taken yet, just who's number 1 on your board.
I would like Cam Ward.
Regardless, then.
At that point, yes.
Let's
say the Titans take Abdul Carter.
Yes.
The Browns better draft Cam Ward.
I think a lot of the fan base is in on that too. Like, I think the fan base wants Cam Ward for the most part. I'm impressed with Cam Ward. I really like him. I think that chip that he plays with on his shoulder, from being a 0-star prospect, from playing at 2 prior colleges before actually going to Miami and dominating at Miami. And I don't look too much into that bowl game of him sitting out that second half, because it was known going into the game, like, people had reported that he was planning on going in and breaking that record and then sitting. Yeah, like, I don't look at that as him giving up on his team like some people do.
If you follow recent trends in history, they should have been happy that he played in the Pop-Tarts Bowl at all. Like, most of these guys wouldn't have played point blank. So
if I remember,
the fact that he played a half, God bless him. I give him a lot of credit. Most guys don't even do that nowadays.
Yeah, didn't Christian McCaffrey sit out of his bowl game? Why did that?
Yes, he did. I think he was one of he was the trendsetter for that.
Yeah, I think he was the trendsetter for it. He was
one of the very first ones who ever did that.
So Cam Ward not playing or playing a half, I'd rather him play the half and go out there and play one last game for me than just not play at all, I think.
Right. I'm right with you.
Right.
I'm right with you. Look, we disagree on the way that they should attack this draft. That's fine. Not everybody's going to look at it the same way.
Actually, it sounds like both of our number 1 options right now are Cam Ward.
Right. I don't see him being there too, whatever.
I'm hearing a lot of traction on Carter. Granted, as of this recording, we're almost a full 2 months out. It's like just under 2 months from the draft.
Remember what we said on last week's podcast? What do they call this all?
Yeah, what'd you say, crazy season?
It's called silly season.
Silly season, yeah.
It's always been called, it's silly season for a reason. So I believe about 10% of what you hear right now.
Yeah, I think in 2017 and 2018 with the number 1 picks, we were hearing Mitch Trubisky at this time. We were hearing Sam Darnold or Josh Allen, and ended up being Baker.
You can't believe.
We thought Bradley Chubb was a guaranteed Cleveland Brown, and it ended up being Denzel Ward.
Yeah. Again, I don't believe much of what I hear right now. So we spent a lot of time on this tonight, and until like the weeks leading up to the draft, we're kind of probably going to talk about other things with the Cavs doing well. Like, that's why I know a lot of people like hearing about this, and to be perfectly honest with our listening audience, it's not my favorite thing to discuss at this time of year, but it's something that a lot of people like and enjoy. And so cheers to silly season, listeners, because we just gave you a whole 45 minutes of silly season.
Yeah, and it's funny because as you know, I'm like the NFL draft's biggest fan. It's one of my favorite sporting events every year, if you even consider it a sporting event, because there's no sport actually being played. It's just a guy walking up to the stage and reading off names. But I absolutely love it. I've loved it ever since 2007 when Brady Quinn came out. So I'm always looking forward to silly season. It's a fun time for me. It's a fun time, I think, just for a lot of the fan bases around the NFL that don't have a lot to look forward to during the season, that they can actually, throw some hope, throw some faith at some of these young players coming in and try to embrace them and actually have some hope coming into a season. So I always have fun with it, and I'm glad because I do think, like you just said, it's going to be a while before we talk about it again, because we probably haven't talked Browns extensively in about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe even 5. So it was nice for us to focus on it, and it took up a big chunk, if not all of this current episode.
I would say Browns on the field, because we did spend a lot of stuff on the stadium stuff, which that's important too.
Yeah, that's true. But like the actual team aspect of it, the off season,
the team
draft.
building,
yes, exactly.
The team building, the front office, all that good stuff too. So I know Kevin's a huge fan. He knows I'm not as big of a fan, but I recognize the importance of it, I guess, to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's what a lot of the foundation of NFL teams are built on. Their foundational players are typically found in the draft.
So listen, it's not my favorite thing, but hey, I gave you my opinions honestly, and Kevin and I disagreed on silly season stuff a little bit, and that's okay. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good to have a little bit back and forth. So reminder, comment on any of our social media platforms, your thoughts and feelings on anything we just discussed in that Browns breakdown there. And give us your thoughts. You could even give us your thoughts on silly season. Are you a fan of all this before we were so far away from the draft? Do you not enjoy this stuff? What do you like? What do you think? Please let us know. Give us your feedback on all that stuff. So, real quick before we get out the door here, Kevin, we're about a week or so, about 10 days into, no, not quite, about a week or so into spring training game action.
As of this recording?
Yes, as of this recording.
So when this releases, about 2 weeks.
Right.
2 weeks in.
So, real quick, I wanted to touch on who ultimately do you want to see? I know who you want to see in right field. You made that clear on last week's podcast on opening day. Who do you want to see win this second base job for the Guardians?
Yeah, so right now, what is it? It's between Brito and Arias right now.
Brito, Arias, they're throwing Schneemann in there. They're throwing.
I like Schneemann as more of a utility guy.
They're throwing Freeman's name around.
Yeah.
But to me, the two that you mentioned off the top, that's who it's going to
Those are the front runners. I'm actually leaning towards, right now I'm going to lean Brito, and it's going to be the same reason last year that I leaned Rocchio over Arias, and that's that we've already seen Arias so much and we know what he is. And we don't even know, he's played the outfield, he's played third, short, second. He's played pretty much first. He's played pretty much everywhere outside of catcher for this team. So we know what he is at this point in his career. I would like to see Brito in there, and if he stinks, then he stinks, but at least we're giving the kid a shot. And worst case scenario, I think we just put Schneemann out there full time. But I do like him more as a utility guy, the guy that just kind of floats around. He gives you an okay bat, but decent fielder. So
yeah, I think he's a good bench piece. I don't want to see Schneemann every day though.
Neither do I.
They tried that last year. It wasn't great. Now, and people could say, well, he's a young player, but he's an older prospect. I mean, he's already 27 years old. So to me, that's fine. I'm with you. I'd like to see Brito too. I'd love it. I just don't think it's going to happen because I think they're going to give Arias one last crack at an everyday role because he is out of options. And I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I agree with you.
And we'll obviously be talking a lot more Gardos coming up, moving in here as we have a little bit more results to talk about, and we get closer and closer to that countdown of opening day, which I can't wait for, even though I'm very negative in the off season. Again, I very much cannot wait for my personal favorite sport league wide to be played in the MLB. So I'm looking forward to that. But again, like you said, I know your right field opinion. I was going to ask you, but go back to last week's pod.
Chase DeLauder.
Yep, Kevin wants Chase DeLauder every day to start the year. I don't know if that one's going to happen too. And it's just because I think my mind's trained like that, as is yours, because we know how this organization is. Yeah. They move prospects at a snail's pace.
Yeah, and I would say even not necessarily DeLauder every day, but I know you had said it in last week's pod, but just the platoon of DeLauder and Noel based off of who the pitcher is, righty or lefty. That's probably the route I would go is the combo of DeLauder and Noel.
And speaking of, like, to your Arias point, like, I'm over the Will Brennan experiment. No matter, like, he's gotten 2 years basically. He's almost, in every day against righties, and he's going to be a 265 hitter who's going to hit about 8 home runs and driving about 40 runs. To me, Will Brennan's fine as a fourth outfielder. I don't envision him much more than that.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
So,
I think he sometimes is an unlucky hitter because I feel like a lot of his contact is like 80 to 90 miles an hour plus off the bat.
Yeah, no, he definitely is. Exit velo is good at times. I agree, but I just don't see him as much more than a fourth outfielder. And he's had most of 23 in the big leagues, most of 24. Came up at got a little taste in 22. Same as Arias, really. They've had a lot of time in 23, a lot of time in 24. They both got taste in 22, and they were both pretty impactful in that divisional round series in 22 against the Yankees. But ever since then, they've both kind of shown themselves to be bench players to me. But the organization, I think they look at it differently. Let's give these guys one last chance. So I both see them getting a chance at the beginning of the season. And if things go the way I anticipate, I think both could potentially be in super reserve roles or not on the roster or playing for the Columbus Clippers come Memorial Day.
Yeah, and that's realistic.
So, all right. Anything else you want to touch on?
I think that's about it. I wish we could touch on some Cavs, but I know it's going to be so far behind by the time this releases. So, I mean, go Cavs at this point.
Yeah,
that's about the
Cavs.
only touch on that we can have.
I mean, just taking names and numbers on a nightly basis. Just
love it.
Just ass kicking. That's all it is. Call them the Cleveland ass kickers.
Yeah, they're keeping us sane right now.
Yeah, call them the Cleveland ass kickers. That's all I can say. So, all right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget, we are available everywhere you like to go and check out social media. We're there on Twitter. We're there, or X. We're there on Instagram, and we're there where the kids like to be, TikTok. So we're everywhere at CLE Sports Realm. Comment anywhere you'd like. And then, of course, you can also comment on any of our platforms where the podcast airs itself, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Derek, great job on the other side. Kevin, good job out of you. That'll do it.
Thank you.
Peace out, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Go Cavs.